And so Jamie, do you want to lead off or do you want me to?
Well, just welcome everyone who's joining us in the meeting and virtually. Thanks for joining this water committee meeting of OWEB. And just to say that the two agenda items we've got is for staff to provide an update from the special session on emergency drought funding, and then also to talk a little bit about the proposal to modify the committee structure and consolidate committees. That's on our agenda for today. And then also these meetings are open to the public, but we do not have public comment as part of these agendas at this point, but we will have for our January meeting. And with that, I'll turn over to our Executive Director, Lisa.
Thank you. I hope everybody had a great holiday weekend. And you're getting ready for another one in terms of a nice New Year's. We have, I think, what I hope to be a relatively short agenda today because I had shared information previously around the December special session that took place. But what I thought might be useful is for me to walk through kind of the pots of funding that OWEB received, General Fund for Disaster Drought Relief, and how we're looking at approaching that based on what we know. We have a high-level framework that we've been working on. Stephanie Page, the Deputy Director, has been reaching out to individuals and having conversations and really making sure that how we're thinking about things aligns with the conversations that had gone on prior to the session, and then trying to figure out how to get new grant programs stood up relatively quickly. So let's just talk through it a little bit. So there was 3.6 million of general fund appropriated to implement matching grant dollars to irrigation districts to support investment in irrigation modernization projects. And with that came staff. 2 million of that is specifically marked to go to Jefferson County irrigation district. And so that's the first pot of money. The second pot that we really received were 2 general fund appropriations for drought resilience work and projects in Jefferson and Klamath counties. And I think this is really to look at, what can be done for drought resilience looking into the future. And we're still trying to tease out some other opportunities. The thing that I've thought about this to liken it to is some of the work that was done in the Harney Basin, at the local level, looking for local solutions to deal with some water issues. And so really being able to convene tables and discussions around that and, potentially maybe do, I've heard that there was some interest around a feasibility study, I think, with in Jefferson for irrigation and where the pumping station is at, et cetera. So there's 2 million there. And then for Klamath, money was appropriated specifically for off-channel watering. And we're working through the details of how that can come about. And let me give you the numbers exactly. I have like 3 different documents that I'm working from. So it's $3 million to provide grants for livestock watering wells and construction of off-channel watering facilities in Klamath. And so we've even started some discussion around what other parameters could be around it. So if we're doing off-channel watering, then what can we do in terms of riparian protection? And what will that cover? And so thinking about that potentially in terms of fencing and some other things that could come together. So you get that whole water quality package for water quality protection in the Klamath. And then finally, there was an additional $3 million for Jefferson County to work with the Soil and Water Conservation District to support stewardship practices on irrigated land to prevent erosion and soil degradation, as well as the potential spread of noxious weeds as a result of, the challenges of not having a normal cropping system in place. As we've started talking about these, there are a couple of places we're thinking about how we might do maybe some block grants, like working with the Soil and Water Conservation District in Jefferson to try and help with some of the workload associated with the grant programs. And then to give you like some sense of who Stephanie's been reaching out with. So NRCS, FSA, Rural Development, the Governor's Regional Solutions Team, April Snell, that works with the districts. Marianne Cooper had done some work with this around Farm Bureau. The Richards in Jefferson County, and some others that had written, I think, to the governor and the legislature looking for some relief, as well as some legislators. Then in Klamath, engaging with entities down there that have been involved with some of the water quality issue and the drought issues, because there are some alliances that have already been started. And so how do we leverage those relationships and what we've learned, as well as we need to do some work reaching out with the tribal interests around these as well. And so that gives you a sense of, in the week and a half from the time special session happened to moving into the holiday break, the work that we've started to get things up and going and moving. This week, we started working on position descriptions for the 3 new positions to try and get those out as soon as possible. We need to do some work with the whole exec team because we haven't all been together since all of this happened, really to have any discussion and think about exactly how we want to have things fit together. One of the things that I was thinking about and noodling yesterday, where do we have a couple of the positions located? Should they be in Salem? Should it be, in the region? And working through some of those details and making sure that we put the assignments in the right places here within the organization to be the most efficient in terms of getting the work done. So that gives you a sense in terms of the special session dollars. I think staff have indicated to me that this is one of the first times OWEB has been involved in, a special session with emergency funding like this. So we really have tried to move things along. And it looks like Courtney has her hand up. Okay, I have a little white hand in your square, so I'm not sure. I'm just checking. So I'm going to pause there, take a breath, and see if there are any questions from the board. Meg.
Yeah. Hi, Lisa. Thank you. So I just realized, excuse me. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Yeah. This is really just a point of background information for me. When I read through the summary when you first sent it, I was wondering, I think we're all aware of the kind of crisis level situation in Klamath County. But I did find myself wondering what is going on in Jefferson County. I was not aware that. I mean, that's that's like $7 million going to Jefferson County, right? And I wasn't aware that there was this kind of need there. So I just wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what's happening there.
So I think Jamie has a couple of issues. I think that area was hit really hard because of the fact they're junior water right holders. And so water, they may not have gotten a crop, and there are lots of challenges with it, is my understanding. And I know Jamie wanted to visit a little bit with some of the work and conversations she's had in Jefferson. I think that may help shed some light on all of it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Meg. It almost like you queued this up, because I had told Lisa before that we've been hit pretty hard in Central Oregon, especially Jefferson County, and so I had actually connected with the executive manager of North Unit Irrigation District, which is essentially the irrigation district in Jefferson County. And he had shared with me the letter they submitted to the legislature. So I wanted to read that on his behalf. Since we're not taking public comment on this, I'll read that. But also just to make a couple points. And first of all, to get a sense of Jefferson County, ag is, of course, a huge part of the economy, as with many of our rural communities, but a huge impact. A little bit of bragging on Jefferson County. For those of you who don't know, it actually produces over half of the carrot seed sold internationally across the globe. So a humble but very proud. But there's also a bunch of other ag as well. So don't want to just call out the grass seed, but the carrot seed. But there's some really important things going on around ag in Jefferson County, and of course, what impacts farmers impacts the local economy and Madras and across the board, our farm workers. And so there's a huge impact. And then also another point, and again, this is touched on just briefly, is it's also part of the Warm Springs Reservation is in Jefferson County. So the overlap on water issues, water rights, and with the tribes as well. So I really appreciate Lisa mentioning that will be part of the conversation and collaboration. And then one other thing to mention, just to be aware of, is that in Jefferson County, there was a 10-year process that ended last December, about a year ago, on a habitat conservation plan that was recently approved. And with that going through right at the same time that we're being hit with this really intensive drought, it set the stage for some real conflict within the region, similar to what's been a conflict in the past in Klamath. And so I think a lot of us are familiar with the conflicts that have been in Klamath for the last 2 decades. There's the real potential for that here in Central Oregon as well. And so I just, first of all, really applaud the legislature for recognizing the need in both of these areas and specifically earmarking some funds. And with that, if I could just to my colleagues, and this is partially to my fellow board members, but also the public, to share some of the information provided by Mike Britton, the executive manager for the North Unit Irrigation District, which is in Jefferson County, and representing farmers in the ag community in Jefferson County. This was the letter that they provided to the legislature just earlier this year. So thank you for this opportunity to share my observations and subsequent support for the state's drought relief legislative package. There's no hiding the fact that catastrophic drought conditions in Central Oregon and across the West have begun to take its toll on American farms and ranches. The farms and ranches in the North Unit Irrigation District that the North Unit Irrigation District serves are no exception. Western irrigated agriculture must be preserved and protected for a host of economic, sociological, environmental, and national security reasons. The American food consumer nationwide has access to a cornucopia of foods throughout the year, largely because of the Western irrigated agriculture and the projects that provide water to these farms and ranches. North Unit Irrigation District, NUID, plays an invaluable role in conveying irrigation water to nearly 60,000 irrigated acres of high-value crops in Central Oregon. Over the years, NUID farmers have produced wheat, potato, alfalfa, grass seed, onions, garlic, carrots for seed, and peppermint for tea and oils that flavor gum, candy, and even toothpaste. NUID farmers grow approximately 55% of the US domestic and 45% of the global market for carrot variety seed. So a correction on my earlier comments. If you eat a carrot today, it is likely originated from a farm in the North Unit Irrigation District in Jefferson County. As Oregon's second largest irrigation district, NUID is an economic powerhouse. The value of the agricultural industry in Jefferson County, supported by NUID, surpasses that of Crook and Deschutes counties combined. NUID is at a turning point in its long history. Ongoing dry years, excessive heat, extreme drought, wind and water shortages have created the perfect storm of a natural disaster. Hydrologic conditions in the region have been so dry for so long that 100% plus snowpack last winter and spring was not enough to resolve ongoing dry conditions. The region was so dry that much of last year's snow and subsequent snowmelt did not reach regional reservoirs or tributaries, but was instead absorbed into the dry soil. In 2021, NUID farmers were allocated as little as 0.5 acre feet per acre and subsequently ran out of water on August 20th of this year, even with the conservative allotment. And just to say, in terms of work I've done, that not only impacted this growing season, many of the farms need to set the stage and do some planting for next growing season, and that was impacted as well. So really devastating, a 2-year impact on the local economy. In addition to drought, fast-paced inflation, labor shortages, volatile markets, and increased farm inputs are also contributing to the uncertain times NUID and its farmer space. Without help, NUID and its farmers have little hope of remaining productive economic drivers of the regional economy they have been for decades. The state's drought relief package will have a profound impact on the ability of NUID and its farmers to remain solvent while continuing to be solid economic drivers for Oregon and the Central Oregon region, all the while ensuring food remains on the tables of homes across the nation and around the world. And so without question, the state's drought relief package is vital to NUID, its farmers, ranchers, and NUID strongly supports the relief package. So I just wanted to, again, share that to speak to Meg's question. And thanks for prepping it, Meg, because a lot of people, like I said, are familiar with what's been going on in Klamath, but not as familiar with just the devastation that we've had in Central Oregon for a lot of our local economies, local ag economies. So wanted to share that on behalf of NUID.
Thank you.
Yeah, Gary.
Thank you, Meg, for bringing that up, because I had this very same thought when I read that earlier and then listening to Lisa here. So, Jamie, can you tell me what this money is going to be spent for? Is this what are the long-term benefits of this money other than just keeping these guys solvent for another year? Is there going to be any efficiencies built into the irrigation systems over there? Or?
Yes, I think I can respond to that to just give you a sense for it. So I mentioned the 3.6 million for matching grants for irrigation districts to support improvement modernization. I've heard piping, in terms of water conservation. Not only North Unit, but the other irrigation districts, because there's 1.6 available there. I think looking at, additional efficiencies around water use could be part of that as well. So that's that longer term vision of what you do in terms of managing with the water that we have and potentially less. But piping and canal lining is the thing that's come up a lot for that one. I think the 2 appropriations of $1 million for Jefferson and Klamath for resilience work, that's really, again, kind of looking at that long-term picture. And, I think there could be discussions about current cropping systems potentially, and are there other cropping systems, to be thinking about, or et cetera. So trying to think about how that we use what we have, or knowing we're going to have less and still being able to maintain agricultural production and local economies. And so I think in Klamath, the chunks that we have, that the 3 million, it's really focused, I think, towards the water quality issues, in the basin, as well as some potential efficiencies.
So is the water source for that area over there, Deschutes, Crooked River, Metolius, all of that? Is that all part of that?
So I need staff to respond to that, or Jamie. Do you know what the sources of the North Unit water?
Yeah, there's a combination, but some of that does come down from the sources that you mentioned, Gary. And but the key piece there is the being junior water right holders. So a lot was lost. There was a lot of discussions this past summer about different opportunities to for water sharing, different potential incentive programs. So that's part of the ongoing conversation. Then, of course, there's Western water law that creates some restrictions to how that can happen. So that's all part of the ongoing conversation. There's also conversations that I believe are underway with Warm Springs, but those are, I don't believe those are under the purview of this package.
Well, and even amongst the small team when we met early last week to talk about the packages, Stephanie brought up kind of that larger footprint of how the water moves through that basin and thinking about, are there opportunities, upstream of the North Unit irrigation district for efficiencies as well, so that, it helps maintain the water and keep it in the system.
Yeah, sorry, just to that point that Lisa was mentioning, of course, you all know that if just some of the complexities of water law, that some of the folks upstream want to make sure that they don't give up rights or there's not some jeopardy there. And then also there's a couple irrigation districts that have senior rights to North Unit that go through the different counties. So it's a pretty complicated package.
Okay.
Can I ask another question, Lisa or
Sure.
Jamie? The drought resiliency projects, I assume that whatever happens with them, we're not going to lose track of the nexus to OWEB's mission in use of these funds. There's a lot of ways that drought resiliency can go, and they won't all have that nexus that we would need to
So
keep
one
in
thing,
mind.
so one thing to remember, these are general fund dollars and not Measure 76
Oh,
lottery
okay.
fund dollars,
All right,
right? So there's more
so
flexibility
they can
there.
do
Yeah.
whatever
So
the
think,
legislature says they can do with them.
Right.
We can do with them. Okay,
it's a little bit
Good.
different. It's kind of like the firemen.
yeah, Right.
We've had a lot of conversations here recently, and I think with the climate committee too, around Measure 76 and the purpose of Measure 76, and the intention around it for that core mission of OWEB around conservation, habitat, and restoration work. But this is a different funding source, so it gives a little more flexibility to those dollars.
and our focus here would be the grant administration function rather than
Right, rather than the direct mission
Yeah.
of OWEB. And I think my sense is, not having been here during the fire conversation,
right.
during the long session, this is really in alignment with
That same approach. Yeah.
that same approach. OWEB has an incredible reputation for being an efficient machine for granting, and being able to, the grant system and managing the grants, and being able to stand things up pretty quickly. And I think that's a big chunk.
That's the idea here. Do we have some place to look to? I mean, is the board going to have any input on the non-Measure 76 grants? And if so, what are we looking to let us know whether this is a good drought resiliency project or not? Is there something out there that we're going to rely on, or you're going to rely on?
So we have the statutory
the stuff in the
appropriation
statute
lang-
about this?
the appropriations language in each of the appropriations
Okay.
to fall back on.
All right,
And
and that's it.
it's pretty broad is what I'm going
Okay.
to tell you.
Yeah.
So I think it's thinking about too how to leverage things
Mhm.
and trying to leverage it with current collaborative work that's already
Mhm.
out there
Yeah.
as
Okay.
well.
Will the board be working? I guess you don't really know yet. It probably depends on how you're going to do that. How you're going to do these, particularly the drought resiliency ones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Is
a couple-
all of this money general fund money? It is all. Okay.
Yeah, 11.6.
That's right. I forgot that.
General fund. It's a big chunk.
Courtesy of the feds? Is most of it federal money or
No,
no? It
state
really is general fund money.
dollars.
Okay.
Yeah. Courtney had something she was going to offer up.
Yeah, I was just going to add, Meg, to respond to your question about, how it's going to work. So for the wildfire response funding,
Right.
that the board did in one action delegate
To the
director the ability to award those grants. And like Lisa said, we haven't had conversations yet at the executive team at exactly what it's going to look like,
Mhm.
but it'll probably be very similar. And then the staff will be working collaboratively with partners to develop what the application looks like, what the review process looks like. And then especially when things are more like the block grants, to be working with the local partners to ensure, again, that the projects are meeting the guidelines of the award and doing what they're supposed to be doing, and then regular reports back to the board, just like we do with the wildfire response grants.
Thank you. Good. Thanks. Well, everything that you all just said is helpful. Thank you.
Good. And I think that right now, as we've been working through the agenda, there is an action item on the January board meeting agenda around that delegation to the director. Jamie, you have a question or an observation?
Yeah, thanks. And I really appreciate, Meg, your questions and also Gary's as well. I think that sense of, staying along the guidelines that were the direction given by the legislature obviously becomes the primary directive in terms of these specific funds, but also making sure that it dovetails with some of the it dovetails in with OWEB projects to that extent possible. And to Courtney's point about to really expedite it, give the board will have an opportunity, the full board will have an opportunity to hear about it and talk about it and comment on it at our January meeting. But to that delegation with direction makes sense to me. I guess the question I have is for how it's queued up for the board meeting. Will there be some decision points around direction? I heard that staff hasn't really gone into the details yet in terms of how that connection with OWEB work, that question is going to be answered because the board members will have that question.
Yeah.
I guess what do you anticipate that part of the conversation looking like in January?
So I think I'm hoping by then we'll have a little better idea around some more of the parameters. We know that some of the money is for matching grants. So I think we're anticipating there's going to be some federal money coming in. Those would be for, those irrigation district improvement projects. And thinking about efficiency, there has been conversation, and Meg, you would know this probably better than I do. There's the Oregon Conserved Waters Act.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's around the irrigation grant money, it does have reference to the Conserved Water Act.
I saw that. Yeah. And
So-
I think that might not be I don't know that it's exactly called that. I think it's the allocation of conserved water.
Allocation of conserved water, correct.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. But I did notice that, and I was happy to see it because I'm a fan of using that program. But not everybody is a fan of using the program because, for the water user, it can be more daunting, I guess. But so is that is kind of stated as a I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that gets factored in to decision making. Because, you know, we definitely, as you all know, sign off on acquisitions at least where we don't have certainty about the water staying in stream, but we have pretty high confidence.
Mhm.
And I don't know whether this is going to mean we're going to need to have certainty or not. So more to come, I suppose, on that.
I think that there's a lot of this you're right, there's more to come, and just trying to get all of us in one place. I know we're really trying to build on the experience Renee had setting up the fire
Right.
grant and thinking about the parameters and taking what she did there and trying to, you know, channel it over as much
Yeah.
as possible, and then thinking about some of the parameters in our existing grants programs, like the small grants program. But, you know, whether any of these would have similar caps or not. I mean, so there's similarities and differences, and trying to bring that together for the most efficient, effective way to get the money out the door with accountability. And we have been talking about accountability and thinking about quarterly reporting, because I fully anticipate we'll be asked to report back, you know, to the legislature around this. And so, you know, knowing what's happening with it and what types of projects are and where we're at along the way.
Yeah, and we do have experience, quite a bit of it, funding modernization projects with irrigation districts and using the allocation of conserved water program, which you have to do if you're using public funds. And there's a minimum of the proportion of water saved that has to be returned in stream under that program. And so that's going to be a part of this going forward as well.
That's right. I forgot that it'll be required under existing law anyway, in this context of piping, at least in this.
Yeah, the difference that we see in
Yeah.
our regular open solicitation programs is that often an applicant will come in and say, if you fund this project, we'll put 100% of that water in stream that we save. Now, I wouldn't expect that here. We'll probably be working at the minimum that's required by statute, but we do have experience with the program, and of course the heavy lifting is done by the Water Resources Department to process the final order and get that all worked out.
Eric, help me. I'm losing track of. I feel like when we fund acquisitions, we don't always require this. And is that because there's something in the conserved water statute, or the allocation of conserved water statute, that treats that kind of project differently? Because that's public funds too. What am I forgetting? I know I'm forgetting something. I don't know what.
The water acquisitions program can fund traditional projects that result in permanent in-stream transfers, but we can also fund contractual agreements between non-governmental entities, like in the Lostine River, where the Freshwater Trust is the organization that's doing the monitoring, doing the documentation of water saved. The farmers in the area can participate on a voluntary basis by signing in that case, it's a minimum flow agreement. And when the water level in stream gets down to a certain point, that triggers the agreement, and the irrigators voluntarily stop pulling water from the river. And so we're not funding irrigation modernization or irrigation efficiency. We're just making payments for irrigators that are voluntarily deciding not to pull water from the stream in those cases.
Okay. Got it.
I think Gary had a hand up too.
Yeah, Lisa, can you, do you have a sense of how much this funding might go to block grants? And you mentioned the SWCD, working with them, which makes sense to me, but how might that work?
So in trying to think about this, I think the one allocation that we thought was most likely to think about block grants is maybe thinking about a way to work out the $3 million for, no, it's not 3 million. It's the soil conservation one, working with Jefferson County Soil and Water Conservation District. I think that one has some potential for it. There may be some potential with the Klamath money for the off-channel watering.
Okay.
But I think we have to think about what parameters are around that, building a system off-channel, and then what are the protections. And so is weighing and measuring that with us doing the granting more directly, project by project. We're just trying to, I think we're still trying to figure that out. I've suggested block grants for efficiency's sake with the agency and workload management. I think staff have talked to me a lot about accountability and concerns about accountability, because the staff have much more experience working in this grant space than I do. And I respect and honor that. And if, just trying to find the right balance for the workload that's coming in and the current workload that we have already in place.
Yeah, I would think that some of those things, like you mentioned, would make sense. Because there's some of those practices are going to be, I mean, at different scales. Some of them won't be huge and others will be. So, so that does, if we have an SWCD that, and most of them have worked on those kind of practices before that are good at that, it would, that would be a good way to channel that money and get some good results out of it.
Well, and we also even talked about, and I'll throw this out for you all to think about, and I don't know how all of Stephanie's conversations have gone. But would we provide funding to the district to hire a staff person to work on the ground with landowners in terms of implementation of the practices that help around the soil erosion, noxious weed prevention, control, in these situations where they haven't been able to use the normal cropping patterns, and how does that link into NRCS type work as well?
Are any of these funds available for work on government land, or is it all directed towards private land?
That is a really good question, and I'm going to look to Eric and Courtney. I don't know that I've asked that question of anybody that was part of this process. I mean, I guess I need to do a little more exploration around that, Gary.
Okay.
Unless Courtney or Eric
I don't have nothing more specific. I think it's not explicit in there. However, the legislative intent seemed to be around private land.
Yeah, Meg.
Following up on the block grant question, do you guys have a sense of how happy are you with the amount of staff funding you got for the amount of work that you think is going to come out of this, and that's not going to be the usual lane that we try to stay in for OWEB?
So there was one more position that we had in a fiscal as this package was evolving that didn't get included. And so it's short of what we had asked for. That said, we've started those conversations immediately with DAS and legislative fiscal around it. And so it's known. In retrospect, there are a couple other things that I think we need to be thinking about longer term if we're going to get additional dollars that come in that aren't 76 type dollars. One of the things that we talked about was internal auditor money, in terms of oversight and checks and balances in a system. I think we did get staffing and money, which I'm happy about. It's like finding the right mix, but we were shorter than what we had in our final fiscal analysis. So we're working through that, Meg.
Okay. Well, I'm supportive of efforts to be efficient, balancing accountability. Maybe some of the accountability burden goes to the recipients of the grants, so that, just finding the right balance, because
Right.
it's another opportunity for you all to go forward. Yeah.
Well, and just to kind of riff off of what Meg was saying, that what also occurred to me, you're talking about staffing. There's both the advantage of helping organizations do effective work on the ground, so the additional staffing, but also who people individually report to sometimes determines how that oversight can happen. And then auditing is near and dear to my heart. So when you say that internal audits, I always find that such a great opportunity to do some internal learning and kind of growing. But the comment I was thinking about before that I just want to add to just flag for you is questions in my mind for the January report. You mentioned before, similar to Renee's work on the wildfire grants. So one of the questions I'll have is what were some of the lessons learned? And so if that could just be spoken to as part of that presentation. I know one of the things, and I shared this at a previous meeting, and that's a different type of setup, but there was, feedback I had heard from the community on having a review process when it was the case of cutting down trees. This is going to be a different type of grant, different projects, but if there's a similar type of thing that major change is going to make, is there some kind of public input process in the community? I guess that'd be one thing. And then also, I guess, Lisa, you made the point before that these funds have different direction, but I would, to Gary and Meg's point, I would love to see, as the ideas are presented, some kind of tie into OEB priorities. I mean, collaboration with tribes. I mean, there's things in our strategic plan that I think you could say, well, in this, and so I really feel comfortable with the concept of saying, yeah, with these resources to expedite, delegate that authority to you, but with this set of parameters. So we're really clear. So if there's any discomfort with how that money is going to be spent, I think that would be addressed with those overarching principles that will drive how decisions are made. And then the other question, a really great question that came up about grants being available on government land. I just also want to add, when you're looking into this and getting more information, is also about tribal lands. So when you talk about Jefferson County, there's the overlap with the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, sovereign nations. So there's drought throughout. So that will be one of the questions in my mind when we look at this specifically in January at the full board meeting, and what some of those opportunities are. And so, and I'm not sure when their tribal council meets and who are, the specific, that how we liaise to get feedback from them also in terms of that process would probably be really helpful on this conversation.
Okay, thanks for that.
Yeah. And then I also just had noted that Eric has been shy. I don't know if Eric, you, Meg and Gary and I have been making comments. I don't know if you had any comments you want to add to this as well.
Jamie, can you be specific of which Eric you're speaking to?
Sorry, that's right. We have the required multiple Erics on this call. Eric Murray, I was talking about you specifically as a member of the board.
Jamie, thank you very much. No, I didn't have anything specific to add. Thank you.
And I guess it requires me to follow up with Eric Williams, Eric Hartstein, and Jesse or Courtney, if there's anything you guys had, not discluding you guys. I just wanted to make sure that Eric Murray had a chance to win.
Yeah. Thanks for doing that, because I needed to do a quality control check to make sure that I got it all right too. And I usually look to them to make sure, did I miss anything or did I get anything wrong? Because I need your help, guys. Well, so that gives you a sense of where we're at with drought and trying to figure it out. I think the other thing that we had on our agenda, and I'm watching time because we're going to try and make this a quick meeting. We've started some conversations in a couple of the other committees around the current committee structure and the number of committees we have for the board. And is there any opportunity to bring some of these subject matters together? And I hesitate to say this because I don't want it to come out wrong, but to consolidate some of the committees in terms of, and there's a couple reasons for that. One, it's time for the board members. One, two, it's staffing and staffing effort for multiple committees. And, you know, thinking about, are there other ways for me to communicate with the board through some type of maybe more regular general update around what we're doing? And, you know, what do we need to be doing at the committee level? And so one proposal that was thrown out earlier was maybe 3 committees, and thinking about it, a combination of a policy committee that's water, climate, DEI, because the 3 of them, you can't really have a conversation about any part of it without thinking about the other cogs, because they all overlap as we talk about water restoration and future and people in the state. And then the potential of thinking about maybe doing something with, you know, monitoring and FIP. It just depends on the amount of subject matter, because I'm concerned about meeting for meeting's sake, unless we have something really to cover, because everybody's time is precious. And then thinking about the coordinating, having a coordinating committee still, and that may not be the right mix of committees, but really trying to do some potential alignment or realignment given the workload that we have and what's has come at us. And then, you know, making sure though that the board is getting enough communication from us regularly about what we're doing and how that aligns with the board priorities. So Jamie thought this was a good place to put that out there to get people thinking. It will be on the January agenda as a discussion point, you know, to get some feedback. And I would love to hear any feedback that any of you have around that idea, good, bad, modified, you know, whatever, it would be helpful. Yeah, Meg.
Lisa, thanks. I've been thinking about this too, and I have been struck by the number of committees that OWEB uses. You know, I've adjusted to it now, but when I first joined, I thought, wow, this was a lot of committees. And so I in my head, one of the main uses of a committee is for the benefit of staff who are doing the work for the whole board. And if you all are in favor of reducing the numbers, then that says something to me about that leg of this committee stool, basically, and whether maybe we don't really need to have separate committees on all of these topics in terms of how useful it is to the staff for prepping for the whole board. So that is one reaction that I have. I'm open to consolidating. I'm kind of stuck on moving DEI into another committee. I mean, I understand that as a policy issue, kind of, and it's true that it affects everything. Well, I would say that it affects everything we do. But it's one of those topics that history shows tends to disappear if it gets consolidated with other topics, because people aren't as sure how to go about it yet, I don't think. And it's hard. And so it can kind of take a back seat without anybody intending it to. So that is one concern I have with, I actually I think water and climate could reasonably be combined in my way of thinking. I don't know about FIPS and monitoring. You know, I'm not as steeped in those topics from a on the ground standpoint. And so I would take guidance from you all on that. I do think it makes sense to have a coordinating committee, again, if it's useful to getting ready for the whole board to hear and take action. So I had been thinking about it since the conversation you and I had, Lisa, and I just wanted to say where I am right at this moment. So
Thanks. I appreciate that. And I'm not set on what they are. I just think we have to do something to make them more manageable. And maybe it's some of them don't meet regularly, like FIPS. Maybe it's when we're in a cycle that there are people. I'm concerned about workload management in this and not just meeting for meeting's sake. So Gary, go ahead. You had your hand up. I'd love to hear from you.
All right, thank you, Lisa. And Meg, I think you brought up most of the pertinent parts of this. And I guess I see committees as value in, in what the current need is. If they are, if you've got a topic or an issue that is big and needs a lot of work done on it, then, a committee is valuable to do that. Once you wade through that period of time, it's fine to combine them. But if, a committee should be able to focus on one thing or, the major thing, the main thing, and then help the staff, with the questions that are out there. So, and how to take it to the full board. And so that's the only thing that, it seems like to me, there needs to be some flexibility there. And once a committee has done what it needed to do, then combining makes sense.
Before I share thoughts, I just wanted to see if Eric Murray wanted to share his thoughts.
Yes, I'm definitely in favor of combining the climate and water committees, because I don't think there's a lot of there appears to be a lot of overlap there. So I'm definitely in favor of that. Not sure how far I would go beyond that.
So I was going to just mention the other committees that we have, and then you guys can, just think about this in terms of, there's a strategic plan committee. There's the executive committee, monitoring committee, the FIPS committee. Yep. And then land and water and DEI.
So I think that didn't the executive get wrapped into the coordinating? We just changed the name on it.
I think that's probably what it is. I just pulled up, it was a document that I found with all of them.
Got it.
Listed, right? When I was looking to say, how many do we really have?
Yeah. So just to share a couple other thoughts, and I really appreciate Megan, Gary, and Eric's comments. I would note, Lisa, you're talking about utilization of the coordinating committee. If we consolidate, then the composition of the coordinating committee goes away. So just to flag that, because currently the coordinating committee with a larger group, I think it has been helpful for bringing different perspectives, but just to flag that some of those perspectives go away if there's consolidation. The benefits that were mentioned, and this is a combination of what others said, I see really twofold. One is to provide those deep dive opportunities, so that we can focus board meetings on catching those additional questions, but keeping kind of a high level 35 or 15,000 foot level or whatever, so that the committees let us get down to the 5,000 foot or the 5 foot level, or I'm losing my analogies, but just that kind of concept and that real deep dive. So, to Gary's point, whether that's done through potentially even ad hoc committees, there's the potential there. But the other benefit is to ensure that some things are not lost. And Meg spoke to this with the DEI committee, and we tried that. We tried making a separate committee, and then we said, no, let's not do this. We did this last year. Let's incorporate it into the coordinating committee. And it was all really well intentioned. And then the coordinating committee just gets really busy with other things, and it falls off the table and off the plate. So, things like DEI, incorporating how we do, not just what we do, but how we do it, is, I think, critically important for us to meet our core objectives, our core mission. I've said this many a time. So, I don't think we've quite figured that out, but grappling with that, I think, is critically important, and showing we're moving forward on that's critically important. And then one thing I did want to flag, because I think Eric's right, that a lot of the conversations at Water and Climate have been a lot of overlap. And I just want to out myself and being guilty of having purposely done some of that, because I've been trying to hammer home the intersectionality of these issues. When we're talking about impacts of climate, we were talking about before with the emergency grants, the struggle we're having with drought is tied into the change in climate. We cannot be addressing, fully addressing and creating a plan for how we're addressing climate change without incorporating our non-traditional partners and without incorporating DEI aspects. So I've been hammering home at each of these meetings on those topics, not to suggest that that they're not distinct issues, but I've been purposely doing it to hammer home the point that these issues cut across the board. And so I'm not pushing back on that concept. If it's appropriate to combine those things and there's that decision, it's appropriate. But I will make the point that I've been purposely introducing some of these other topics that, someone could say, well, that's another committee, talk about in that committee, trying to make the point that there's overlap and intersectionality on all these issues.
So the other thing I think we can think about, and for you guys to noodle on and provide us some feedback, with the meetings being, the committee meetings being public, right? That's providing another layer of transparency as well around some of the subjects. I don't know if that was part of the conversations previously in terms of making sure people were able to follow the work in the different areas. We do have the meetings are public, they're recorded, and on our, what is it called? Is it called a YouTube channel, Courtney? Okay, on our YouTube channel. So, if anybody wanted to go back and have kind of that sense of what we were talking about, I'm hoping that that's going to be helpful too in some of this work in bringing it together and making sure the board is really aware of what's going on. I feel really good about making the committee meetings public meetings and making sure that there's availability for people to know, what we're talking about and how we're thinking about things, and being able to bring, comments back to the board through the public comment period in our regular meetings, prior to major actions as we're working on some of these hard issues.
I absolutely agree. I think it's a great, that transparency piece is really good. One of the things that, kind of feedback I've heard is that sometimes by the time we get to the board meetings, it's, some of these, the programs or the thought process goes in is more kind of fully baked. And we also may want to explore and discuss with the full board the opportunity to have public comment during committee meetings, because that's when we may find more engagement from some of our community partners when we're still kind of grappling with these ideas. I think that's when there can be a real richness to the conversation, so that there will also be comments, obviously, at the full board meeting. But while we're still grappling with, because there may be people listening in saying, okay, I've got the answer. If you'd only let me, weigh in, I could share a really insightful comment with you. So I'd also like to see us explore that opportunity for the public to weigh in during committee meetings as well.
Yeah, and so I'm going to tell you, I'm not fully baked on what to do with this. I mean, I brought it out as really wanting to think about it and have all of you think and help us think about it. It's about workload management. I mean, I'm going to be as transparent as that, and trying where is the best place for me to have staff spending time, right? In terms of the work in between. And I'm even looking at our meeting packets and our reports and thinking about what's in them and what should be in the packets and what should the board get an email from me, on some frequent basis when something happens. So you all are going to get the emergency drought package. You got it in December. It's still December a second time. We'll probably get it again in climate when we have our second climate meeting, because we needed 2 climate meetings this time around, working through the draft. And then during the full board meeting, plus a written report around it. And so if you're getting a sense for what I'm trying to find a way to streamline some of the work and communication, because each one of them, every time we're setting it up, it's especially like the written report along with the agenda item, it pulls away time from doing some of that grant work, outreach, staff management, day work. I'm really looking at workload in the agency and where we're at and how to leverage it in the right places.
Lisa, I think I was a little bit late to this meeting, and when I came in, you were just finishing something about the meetings being public. Is this a public meeting? Are we
Today is a public
okay.
meeting. Yeah.
And so are we not, so there just happens to be no public in attendance for this?
So what we did for this round, because it was right when I came in, I recognized what was going on in this meeting. I really think is deliberation towards something for the board and concern that they should be public meetings.
Right.
And we haven't had that full conversation with the whole board because I only have one board meeting under my belt.
Yeah.
And so the solution that we came up with was we're going to post them. We're YouTubing them for this time around and allowing for the public comment, and then talk to the whole board about the structure of them, I think, going forward, along with the structure of the committees to find the right balance in that, Meg. So this was our attempt. This is the second one that we've had public. So we did the coordinating committee right after the board, and I'm like, I think these meetings need to be public. And we looked at all of that and said, yeah, think so. So then the first one was climate 2 weeks ago, where we posted it, and we got really good feedback. I've heard good feedback from partners around that.
Yeah.
Being able to listen. And so we can modify the format.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Will we know? I haven't really paid as close attention to how OEB manages public meetings online because I don't chair the board, but I paid a lot more attention on the Water Resources Commission side. And we ask people to let us know when they're coming in. They kind of get admitted and we figure out just so we know who's there, kind of. And do we do that? Are we doing that right now? If anybody had wanted to attend, would we know at least what phone number was attending? Is that how it works?
One.
Oh, okay.
Not today.
Oh, so this is what you're saying, that we're recording and putting up on YouTube, but we didn't notice it for people to be able to participate. Okay.
Yeah, they're able to watch and listen, because remember, the public notice is people are able to listen. It doesn't necessarily.
Right. You don't necessarily have to do public comment and stuff.
Public comment. Right. And so this was our first step at it. How's that?
Yeah.
This round of meetings was step one in trying to mature our process and create a more transparent process.
Okay.
And just to clarify, Meg, that's why I read Mike Britton's comments rather than having him join us and read his own comments, because there's that block. So I communicate with them and said, hey, if you want that information with the committee, just send it to me and I'll read on your behalf.
Yeah.
So we're probably a little clunky chunky in our process yet. How's that?
Okay.
We're trying to figure it out and making change, and we're making change on the fly.
Yeah. Well, it does. It does seem like in terms of workload, the more committee meetings we have that are public, the more any sort of meetings we have that are public, there's no question that is a workload issue, basically. It's a good thing, but it's also, it takes some work, I think. So, yeah. Okay.
Just because this is a live stream meeting, for those who may be listening, if you have additional insights or ideas on ways that OWEB can be responsive to the public, with also recognizing the fact that we do have limited resources in terms of staff time, I want to share those comments directly with Lisa. That would be super helpful, because then as she brings this information back to the board, obviously you're welcome to participate in the full board meeting in January. And can someone just remind me quickly of what date that is, so we get that out there? Do you have that, either Eric or Courtney or Lisa? But anyway, if someone could just share that with the public. So we do have a full board meeting coming up in January. You're welcome to participate and speak at that meeting, or provide written comment in advance. But also in between, if there's comments or ideas you have from this discussion, please share them with Lisa, and she'll bring them back to the full board.
Yeah, and the board meeting is January 25th and 26th.
Yeah, people are always welcome to reach out to me to provide the feedback, and I really welcome the conversations. I'm learning a lot, and enjoying getting to know new people. One thing I would mention to all of you is I've been out on 3 field trips since I met with you the last time, and I'll talk about them at the board meeting. But I've got to tell you, the work that's being done by our partners and the funding that we provide to help and stack things together, it is absolutely inspirational. I didn't know that I would get so excited, and I see the work, and I get really, really excited about the work and the people that are so passionate about what they're doing on the ground, and learning, how complicated some of this work is, especially when you talk about acquisitions and reconnecting watersheds and estuaries. And I didn't know anything about beaver dam analogs until, a month and a half ago. So it's exciting, and it's fun, and energizing. You can't help but get excited when you meet with our cooperators.
Great. Lisa, on this question of the committees, are you guys going to be making a proposal at the next meeting, or are we going to talk about it and then maybe the next meeting there'll be a proposal or some action?
This is how I'm thinking about it. I think we need to talk about it with the full board, and then I think come back
after that conversation.
Yeah, I don't.
Okay.
Or the board say yes, and I get some sense, and we rejigger it. I don't think it takes a board action. The committees, I think, are not something that the board would have to take a vote on. We should be able to have the conversation and do some reconfiguring around it, is my sense. But in approaching it, I think taking it slow and making sure we've listened to everybody's comments and concerns is the right thing to do. And if we don't have to have all the committee meetings, between the January board meeting and the April board meeting, if there's nothing to meet about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, does that seem like a reasonable approach, Meg?
Yeah, I definitely think having a conversation first with the board about what happens with the committees. I don't know what is required. My memory is that we have kind of, sort of signed off on the structures as they've evolved in the past. When we dropped a committee or when we added a committee, the board has kind of weighed in some kind of official way, I think. And I'm speaking from memory, so I'm not sure, but
yeah.
So
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jamie. No, you go.
I was going to say, I think we were in Klamath. This was a couple of years ago, where we had, the Post-its on the wall and all that. And there was a couple of meetings that we had the whole discussion about what got us to this point.
Mm-hmm.
So, with fresh eyes on it to look at and saying, is that process, it made sense then? Is it serving us well now? I mean, it's a fine to ask that question in terms of process. I think, Meg, I would agree with you that I think having the board kind of formally weigh in on it would be appropriate, since it is involving board time. The other thing I was thought about before and didn't mention is there's the possibility of frequency. So if there are some things like, there's a lot of activity going on in the climate committee right now, but there may be a specific DEI committee, for example, that work is allocated, charged to everyone, but there's a specific committee meeting, or this could be tied into the coordinated committee that would be once or twice a year saying, hey, are we on track or not? And if we're missing it. So there's also, there's a bunch of different ways to look at this.
Well, thanks. I appreciate those comments, and we'll think some more about it, but it will be an informational item in January is how I think we've come to approaching it. Because it does come with that whole fresh eyes thing, and how I'm approaching the work probably is a little different than how it's been approached in the past, and thinking about it and thinking about the structure and the structure of the agency. So it doesn't have to be a go fast thing. All right, Madam Chair, anything else? We're right at an hour-ish.
Yeah, and we've actually gone a little bit over than we intended. Just for the good of the order, anything else from board members or staff that we should touch on in this committee meeting before our full board meeting? Anyone?
I have one item of potential interest. It'll take a minute or less. The Water Resources Department got a pretty significant infusion of funds for marijuana enforcement, water use enforcement in this same session, like 29 positions, I think it is. It's quite jaw-dropping because, and I think Southern Oregon is the main focus because they're having such a struggle with it there. I think hopefully there were law enforcement appropriations as well, because this is supposed to be water enforcement, and so anyway, it's just a point of interest that that will be happening. The department is going to be also ramping up. They were already ramping up with 30 some positions from the full session, and now another 29. That's a lot of hiring. So just luck.
Meg,
Yes,
are these going to be like water masters or assistant water masters?
Oh, both water masters, assistant water masters, some technicians, in the building, technicians like hydrogeologists and stuff, and support staff as well. But I mean, that's going to add to the numbers of water masters at the department in a pretty significant way, which is great. I mean, they're already so under-resourced, but this will be, I think they're trying to get clarity on how, if any of those funds can be used for anything other than cannabis enforcement, but that's the need that's been identified in Southern Oregon. So, yeah.
Thanks for raising that, Meg. Actually, I'll say a former board member reached out and was asking about the multiple staffing and how that process is going to roll out and those priorities. So if there's an opportunity to even, I don't know if you would be the connector with that board, if you have any observations you want to make at our January meeting, that would probably be very welcomed from the community to try to get a sense of that. And then also just to say, I know a lot of folks in Southern Oregon, and I've been surprised at how many people have specifically been asking about that. People who are in rural areas and ag who are talking about the drawdown. Yes, we're in a drought, but the real drawdown around cannabis farms, because that's where a lot in our state, that's where a lot of the growth is in Southern Oregon. So that's of super interest to folks in, a lot of interest to folks in Southern Oregon. So thanks for that comment.
Yeah. And that part of the state, I think, is bearing a huge part of the burdens of the industry, and they're not seeing as much of the benefits because of how the tax is structured, or, the retailers pay the tax. So, yeah.
And that is so funny. That was exactly the conversation we have. And so generally speaking, for those, a lot of it's grown in Southern Oregon and a lot of it's sold in the metro area. And so the tax structure benefits goes to folks in the metro area, not so much in Southern Oregon. And in some counties and the more rural counties, the enforcement piece is just, it's incredibly hard for
Yeah.
those counties to address it. So both the water consumption and also security. So yeah, I know that's not necessarily a WIB piece, but if Meg, if you've got some of that
Sure.
comments that you can bring back to our January meeting, I think that'd be of a lot of interest.
I can do that. And you're interested specifically in the cannabis, in the special session appropriations.
Yeah, just because
Right.
it ties into the water
Right.
and staffing. And again, in terms of questions that have come to me. And you see what I did there, Lisa? I asked and delegated that to our board member, and I didn't even ask anything of staff. So, but thank you for raising
You're like
that,
a
Meg.
Gen Zer. You're delegating to me.
Well, and we could use that as part of the water committee report out, just, an update around that, because, like the discussion around the committee structure, it has its own thing, right? And we also have a report on the special session dollars. And so, just
Yeah.
thinking about how to efficiently incorporate that.
Or I can, in commissioner comments,
Yeah,
I can spend 2
exactly.
minutes on it, whatever works.
Either way, or we can tag team on the water committee.
Yeah. Okay.
So excellent. Thank you for
Sure.
that addition. Appreciate it.
Sure.
And anyone else for the good of the order? Seeing none. Thank you so much, Lisa and staff, for the great work you're doing and bringing all this information forward. Really appreciate those observations. Thanks for those of you who join us and members of the public. And then we look forward to seeing you, those who are interested, on January. What was that again, Eric?
25th and 26th.
25th and 26th, where we'll have our public full OWEB board meeting. And with that, thank you, everyone. I'll turn it back to you, Lisa, for closing comments.
All right. I think that wraps it up. Thank you, all of you, for joining and the conversation and the questions around the drought package, because they continue to help us think about, what it should look like as it's evolving, and it's evolving quickly. And I also really appreciate the comments around who else to reach out to. And we're trying to, really be open in that, but that's incredibly helpful, as well as working through the structure of how we operate with the board and the staff and what we're bringing back and forth. So this is helpful for me in many ways, especially as a new director trying to navigate some of this stuff. So thank you so much, and have a happy new year. We'll see you all in
Happy New
January.
Year. Bye-bye.
Bye.